GCP Platform and Cloud Engineering Part 4. This episode has 15 questions. For each question, take a moment to think through your own answer before I share a strong approach. Question 1. FastAPI or Docker? How would you containerize and run a FastAPI application using Docker? Here's a strong way to approach it. I would create a Docker file that starts from a slim Python base image, installs dependencies, copies application code, uses a non-root user where possible, exposes the service port, and starts the app with Unicorn or Gunicorn with Unicorn workers. I would pin dependencies, keep the image small, avoid copying secrets, and add health checks at the platform level. Locally I would run it with Docker run page 8000, and in CI I would tag the image with the commit SHA. Nice. Let's continue. Question 2. FastAPI or Kubernetes? How would you deploy a FastAPI application on Kubernetes? Here's a strong way to approach it. I would build and push the Docker image to a registry, then deploy it using a Kubernetes deployment, service, config map, secret, and optionally ingress. The deployment should define requests and limits, readiness and liveness probes, environment variables, security context, and image tag. The service exposes the pods internally, and ingress or a load balancer exposes it externally if required. I would use rolling deployment or canary, monitor error rate and latency, and keep rollback simple through image versioning. Great. Moving on. Question 3. FastAPI or observability? How would you add logging, metrics, and tracing to a FastAPI application? Here's a strong way to approach it. For logging, I would use structured JSON logs with fields like timestamp, level, service, root, status code, latency, request ID, and trace ID for metrics. I would expose Prometheus metrics or use OpenTelemetry metrics for request count, latency, errors, and dependency calls. For tracing, I would instrument FastAPI with OpenTelemetry and export traces to Jaeger, Tempo, CloudTrace, Datadog, or another backend. The key is correlation. Logs, metrics, and traces should connect through request ID or trace ID. Alright, next question. Question 4. FastAPI or security? What security best practices would you follow for FastAPI APIs? Here's a strong way to approach it. I would enforce authentication and authorization, validate all inputs, use HTTPS, configure CORS carefully, avoid exposing stack traces, sanitize logs, protect secrets, use dependency scanning, add rate limiting where needed, and follow least privilege for database and cloud access. I would also add security headers at the gateway or app layer, keep dependencies updated, use non-root containers, scan images, and log security relevant events without leaking sensitive data. Let's keep going. Question 5. FastAPI or performance? How would you improve performance and scalability for a FastAPI service? Here's a strong way to approach it. I would first measure latency, throughput, error rate, CPU, memory, and database performance. Then I would tune the worker count, use async only where it helps, add connection pooling, cache expensive reads, optimize database queries, move long-running work to background queues, and scale horizontally on Kubernetes with HPA. I would also run load tests with tools like K6, Locust, or JMeter and define scaling based on real bottlenecks, not guesswork. On to the next one. Question 6. FastAPI or CI or CD? How would you design a CI or CD pipeline for a Python FastAPI service? Here's a strong way to approach it. The pipeline should start from a pull request. It runs formatting, linting, tests, dependency scanning, secret scanning, and optionally type checks. After merge, it builds a Docker image, scans the image, pushes it to the registry, and deploys to a lower environment. Production deployment should use approvals, immutable image tags, rollout health checks, monitoring validation, and rollback. For Kubernetes, the deployment can be done with Helm, Customize, Argo CD, Jenkins, GitHub Actions, Cloud Build, or another approved tool. Good. Here's another one. Question 7. FastAPI or troubleshooting? A FastAPI service is returning intermittent 500 errors in Kubernetes. How would you troubleshoot it? Here's a strong way to approach it. I would start with impact and timeline. When did errors start? Which routes are affected? And whether it aligns with a deployment or traffic spike. Then I would check application logs with request IDs, Kubernetes events, pod restarts, readiness failures, resource throttling, memory OOM kills, database connection errors, dependency timeouts, and ingress or load balancer metrics. I would compare failing and healthy pods, check recent config or secret changes, inspect traces if available, and mitigate quickly by rollback, scaling, or disabling a bad dependency path. Nice. Let's continue. Question 8. Python or FastAPI or system design. Design a production-ready FastAPI service for an internal DevOps automation platform. Here's a strong way to approach it. I would design it as a small platform API with clear endpoints for approved automation tasks, backed by authentication, authorization, audit logs, and approval controls for risky operations. The service would run on Kubernetes with a deployment, service, ingress, config maps, secrets, probes, resource limits, HPA, and structured logging. It would use a database for request history and job state, a queue or background worker for long-running automation, and least privilege cloud or Kubernetes identities. CI or CD would run tests and scans, build an immutable image, deploy progressively, and validate metrics. Observability would include request latency, error rate, job success rate, audit events, and traces for external API calls. Great. Moving on. Question 9. API or fundamentals. What is an API and why do we use APIs in modern applications? Here's a strong way to approach it. An API, or application programming interface, is a contract that allows one software system to interact with another. In modern applications, APIs separate front-end, back-end, mobile apps, automation tools, and third-party integrations. A good API hides internal implementation details and exposes controlled operations with clear request and response formats, authentication, authorization, validation, error handling, and documentation. In production, APIs also need observability, versioning, rate limiting, and security controls. Alright, next question. Question 10. API or fundamentals. What is the difference between REST API, GraphQL, and gRPC? Here's a strong way to approach it. REST is resource-oriented and commonly uses HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, PATCH, and DELETE with JSON responses. It is simple and widely used. GraphQL lets clients request exactly the fields they need through a schema, which can reduce overfetching but adds complexity around authorization, caching, and query cost control. gRPC uses protocol buffers and HTTP/2, making it efficient for service-to-service communication, streaming, and strongly typed contracts. For public or general web APIs, I often choose REST. For flexible front-end data fetching, GraphQL can help. For internal high-performance microservice calls, gRPC is strong. Let's keep going. Question 11. API or REST. How would you design REST endpoints for a user or order management service? Here's a strong way to approach it. I would model endpoints around resources and keep naming consistent. For example, get or users lists users, post or users creates a user, get or users or id fetches one user, patch or users or id partially updates a user, and delete or users or id deletes or deactivates a user. For orders, I might use get or orders, post or orders, get or orders or id, and get or users or id, or orders if the relationship matters. I would define request and response schemas, status codes, validation rules, pagination, filtering, authorization, and error response format before implementation. On to the next one. Question 12. API or HTTP. What are common HTTP methods and when would you use get, post, put, patch, and delete? Here's a strong way to approach it. Get is used to read data and should not change server state. Post is used to create a resource or trigger an operation. Put usually replaces an entire resource and should be idempotent. Patch updates part of a resource. Delete removes or deactivates a resource. In senior API design, the method should match the behavior because clients, caches, gateways, and monitoring tools rely on HTTP semantics. Good. Here's another one. Question 13. API or HTTP? What are important HTTP status codes every API developer should know? Here's a strong way to approach it. Important status codes include 200 for successful read or update, 201 for created, 202 for accepted async processing, 204 for success with no response body, 400 for invalid request, 401 for unauthenticated, 403 for authenticated but not authorized, 404 for not found, 409 for conflict, 422 for validation errors, 429 for rate limiting, 500 for unexpected server error, 502 or 503 for upstream or service availability issues, and 504 for gateway timeout. Good APIs use status codes consistently and include a useful error body. Nice. Let's continue. Question 14. API or validation. How do you validate API request payloads and query parameters? Here's a strong way to approach it. I validate request payloads using schema models, type checks, required fields, allowed values, size limits, format checks, and business rules. In FastAPI this is commonly done with pedantic models. In other frameworks, similar validation libraries exist. I validate query parameters for pagination limits, sorting fields, filters, and date ranges. Validation should happen before business logic, and validation errors should return a consistent 400 or 422 response without exposing internal details. Great. Moving on. Question 15. API or auth. How do you implement authentication in an API? Here's a strong way to approach it. Authentication verifies who the caller is. Depending on the use case, I would use OAuth2 or OIDC with an identity provider, JWT bearer tokens, session cookies for web apps, API keys for service integrations, or MTLS for service-to-service authentication. In production, I prefer short-lived tokens, token validation at the gateway or service layer, secure secret storage, HTTPS, proper token audience and issuer checks, and careful logging so tokens are never exposed. Alright, next question. That wraps up this episode. Nice work practicing, and see you in the next one.